If I told you the tallest building on the planet isn't even close to being the most expensive one, you'd probably ask me to prove it. It seems obvious that bigger should mean pricier. Here's the proof it doesn't. The Burj Khalifa stands more than half a mile tall, took over 5 years to build, and cost roughly $1.5 billion. That sounds enormous, until you realize it doesn't even crack the top 20 most expensive buildings ever constructed. Somewhere out there is a structure that costs 10 times more than the tallest building on Earth. It isn't a skyscraper, and by the time we get there, you might not even agree it's a building at all. Before we go any further, we need to agree on what expensive actually means. A price is what someone paid. A cost is what it took to build. A value is a guess at what something is worth today, and that number is almost always bigger and far less reliable. Take the house we're about to visit. It cost around $2 billion to build, but by 2023, it was valued at more than $4.5 billion. Almost none of that difference came from concrete or steel. It came from real estate prices going up around it. Mix cost and value together, and any most expensive building list falls apart before it starts. So here's the rule for this video. We're chasing construction cost, real money spent putting up walls and foundations, not resale value, not insurance value, not somebody's estimate dressed up as fact. That rule is about to eliminate some very famous buildings, and it starts with that same house. That's the house. Antilia, on a street in Mumbai nicknamed Billionaire's Row, a 27-story tower that isn't an apartment block, it's one family's home. 6 people live there, looked after by a staff of roughly 600. There are 3 helipads, a 50-seat private cinema, hanging gardens spread across multiple floors, and parking for more than 160 cars. There's a detail that never makes the highlight reel too. The land it stands on used to be an orphanage. One house, $2 billion, and we've barely started. Why does one house cost that much? Mostly because of what's underneath it. Land in South Mumbai is some of the priciest real estate on the planet, and a building's price tag scales with the ground beneath it, not just what gets built on top of it. Which raises the obvious next question. What happens when you apply that same logic to something built for thousands of strangers instead of one family? Marina Bay Sands looks like a surfboard balanced across the top of 3 55-story towers, its rooftop deck longer than the Eiffel Tower is tall. Inside, a casino, a mall, thousands of hotel rooms, and the most photographed infinity pool on Earth. When it opened in Singapore in 2010, its own developer put the total cost at close to $6 billion and called it the most expensive standalone resort ever built. That title didn't even hold as a ceiling. The company has since announced plans to spend another $8 billion expanding it, meaning the sequel now costs more than the original. Not every expensive building is trying to house strangers. Some exist to make a point. Apple's headquarters in Cupertino is a single glass ring, exactly 1 mile around. Steve Jobs pitched the design to Cupertino City Council himself, then died before a single wall went up. The original estimate was $500 million. By the time it opened, the bill had grown to $5 billion, 10 times the original number, for a building most of the public will never step inside. The curved glass panels for the main ring alone cost more than $400 million. This was never really about square footage. It was about proving a point in steel and glass. Some buildings cost more because of history. One World Trade Center rose on the side of the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan, reaching exactly 1,776 feet, a height chosen to echo the year of American independence. By the time it was finished, it had become one of the most expensive skyscrapers ever built anywhere in the world, at roughly $3.9 billion. Part of that price came from a reinforced base designed to withstand threats the original towers were never built to survive. Part of it came from something harder to put in a spreadsheet. This building couldn't just be tall, it had to mean something. Meaning, it turns out, is expensive too. And if meaning is what makes a building expensive, nothing on this list means more than what's next. In Mecca, Saudi Arabia, 7 towers rise together around a clock face that makes Big Ben look like a watch. It's called Abraj Al Bait. The central tower alone stands over 600 meters tall, wrapped in gold leaf and visible for miles, with 4 clock faces, each 43 meters wide, lit by more than 2 million LEDs. The complex can hold over 30,000 people at once. To clear space for it, an 18th-century Ottoman fortress that had guarded the city for 2 centuries was torn down in 2002, a decision that provoked international protests, particularly from Turkey. Total construction cost? Roughly $15 billion, with some estimates closer to $20 billion once you adjust for inflation. By almost every measure, this is the most expensive single building human beings have ever constructed. Almost every measure. Because Abraj Al Bait doesn't stand alone, it was built directly facing the Grand Mosque of Mecca, the holiest site in Islam, which has been expanded and rebuilt continuously since the 7th century. The current phase alone, underway since 2008, is projected to cost around $100 billion once complete, nearly 7 times what the clock tower next to it cost. 4 million people can gather there to pray at once, a crowd close to the entire population of Los Angeles, standing inside a single structure. Suddenly, $15 billion looks small. Except there's a problem. The Grand Mosque isn't one building the way Antilia or Apple Park are. It's 14 centuries of separate construction projects, funded by different rulers, stitched onto a single site. Comparing its lifetime cost to something built in 5 years is a bit like comparing your entire life's grocery bill to somebody else's single dinner. Which means the real question was never just, what's the most expensive building? It's, what actually counts as one building in the first place? Once you start asking that, the list of contenders gets a lot stranger. Drop the requirement that a building needs walls, a roof, or even a location on solid ground, and a very different contender shows up. 250 miles above your head, moving at 17,500 miles per hour. There's a structure roughly the size of a football field, assembled piece by piece over more than a decade by 5 different space agencies. Every panel, every module, every liter of water had to be launched by rocket at a cost that has run as high as $20,000 per kilogram. Total price, around $150 billion, about 6 years of NASA's entire annual budget spent on one object. It's the International Space Station. It has no address, no land was ever purchased for it, and depending how you count it, it isn't just a contender for most expensive building, it may be the most expensive object human beings have ever built, period. So, which is it? If you mean the most expensive single building put up as one continuous project, that's still Abraj Al Bait at roughly $15 billion. If you're willing to count a site built across centuries as one building, the Grand Mosque of Mecca takes the title at closer to $100 billion. And if you drop the word building entirely and just ask what's the most expensive thing human beings have ever constructed, the answer is the space station floating above us right now, 10 times the cost of the gold-plated clock tower we started with. There isn't one correct answer here. There are 3, and they get bigger depending on how honest you're willing to be about the question you're actually asking. But whichever number you pick, the same few ingredients show up on every entry on this list. Land that's scarce in a city with nowhere left to build. Labor and materials shipped to places that don't have enough either. Security requirements nobody budgeted for at the start. Scope that quietly grows year after year, the way Apple's $500 million campus somehow became $5 billion. And, more often than anyone likes to admit, a client who simply refused to stop spending once the number got embarrassing. Money alone doesn't make a building expensive, ambition does. Money just makes ambition possible. None of these numbers include what happens after opening day. The space station costs roughly $3 billion every year just to keep occupied. Marina Bay Sands has already spent billions more on renovations since it opened. Antilia reportedly needs a staff of 600 just to keep running every single day indefinitely. And behind almost every megaproject on this list is a workforce that built it for a small fraction of what the building cost per square foot. People who never show up in any press release. None of these totals include the cost of what else that money could have done. The hospitals, schools, or housing that same amount could have funded somewhere else. The number on the building is never the whole number. It's just the number someone was willing to admit to. Here's the strange part. We started with a single house built for one family, and the number felt almost impossible, $2 billion. By the end, that number was a rounding error. The house cost $2 billion. The tower cost 15. The mosque cost 100. The station cost 150. Every single answer made the last one look small, which probably says more about us than it does about buildings. Given enough ambition, enough money, and enough time, human beings will spend almost anything on the idea that where or how far above the ground we live actually matters. We just keep moving the definition of enough.